The Joyful Friar podcast is made possible by the generous support of our friends. To support the podcast, please visit nathan-castle.com and donate today. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Joyful Friar podcast. I'm Father Nathan Castle, your host. Today I'm going to be introducing you to a new trilogy. The story isn't new to any of you who have read book 3, which is just right over my shoulder. It's a story from that book that is now 2 years old. It's the story of Ellen. Ellen is a very dear story to me and to my prayer partners who took part, especially Karen, who did the main work of that session. Ellen came in a dream. She's very well spoken. I've just finished rereading her story, and I just love the way she expresses herself. She came during the night of December the 1st, 2021. She brought a story, as people do in this experience that's been going on in my life for nearly 30 years. I was asleep that night, December 1st, 2021, and here's what I saw. I saw the face of a well-dressed, possibly wealthy woman who appeared to be in her late 40s or early 50s. Her eyes were closed, and she was screaming. She was being raped. I awoke. Well, thanks be to God, even though these stories often have violence and often violent death in them, they're always buffered. The Holy Spirit doesn't give me nightmares, and the people are coached in how to tell their story to get the point across, and the point often has very dark elements, um, but it never involves uh, unnecessary gory detail, if you will. So I woke up from this dream, wrote it down as I always do, said a prayer, and went back to sleep. But this one had uncommon depth, and I don't know, I just was very moved by it, and so was Karen, who is one of the prayer partners working on this one. Well, it turned out very often their guardian angel comes through to make themselves available to give us a little clarity about what has really happened, because dreams of their nature can be indistinct and sometimes symbolic. So it's helpful to us. First of all, the guardian angel is is guarding someone who still needs caring for in the afterlife because of their trauma, but they probably never borrowed another human person's voice before. That's part of the process. So the guardian angel models that by coming on the line, borrowing my voice after we've said our protective prayer to St. Michael and, well, inside the Trinity, the Father, Son, and Spirit, but then with the help of different saint and angel friends that keep us safe. Well, we had said our prayers. My partners that day were Karen and Kim, both of whom are professional counselors of different kinds. The person who came on the line was not Ellen's guardian angel. It was Saint Cecilia. Cecilia is the patron of music and musicians in our Catholic world. She explained it this way. She emerged and she says, "This is a lovely, simple work. I was martyred. That much is clear in all of the stories about me." This is Saint Cecilia. "I belong to the genre of story which far too many women share, of men deciding that they know what's best for us and whom we ought to marry. Many cultures have insisted that young women marry someone unknown to them, often for financial reasons or something having to do with clans or tribes. Sometimes political alliances were forged by making a woman marry a man who wouldn't be her choice. I was in a situation like that, to which I objected. That brought me torture, which included physical disgraces. So I have something of the personal resume that might assist in the passage of a woman who was sexually assaulted. We can survive any manner of things, so it's not just me. Some of this work that Father Nathan has done comes when it comes time for people to make the crossing part. There might be something like a wedge, someone who's at the front, and behind them are people fanning out in a group all the way back into infinity, larger and larger. Today, I'm rather like that. I stand at the front of a much larger field of women and men who share the sad experience of being assaulted by another, but who can also testify to the resilience built into us. We need not simply be on the receiving end of someone else's violence or anger. We can regain ourselves if we feel that something was stolen from us, including our soul. The woman you'll be helping today has been listening in on this and has been cooperative, especially of late, in letting some things fall away that are beneath her and attached to her, but not of her. So I'll speak no further, slide to the side, and invite your work to proceed. She's very well spoken too. So that was Saint Cecilia. Ellen came on the line, and I'm going to try to resist the temptation to read to you, but she's so well spoken, it's not easy for me. Um, she explained to us that she had been married to her husband for 30 years, sexually faithful to him. They had raised a couple of children who were now in or beyond college age, and she and her husband were beginning to have some conversations around what their future would be. That season of life where that job of getting children raised to adulthood is finished, and what will we do next? She said they lived in a country club, and their social set was mostly country club people. She also explained that her mother and her in her being raised, church was never really a part of her life, so she didn't have church friends. Most of her social circle were people from the country club. She said once in a while in that circle there'd be a divorce, but there hadn't been all that many. And when there was, it seemed that the group kind of reabsorbed people somehow and all, went on. But then she said, I began to hear murmurings that maybe my husband was having an affair within our circle of friends. She went to her husband and said, I'm hearing these things. Is it true? To his credit, he said, yes, it is. She was baffled because the person with whom he was having an affair, she said, was so like me. He didn't go pick some pretty young thing or some secretary at the office or something. He was having a sexual affair with a woman about her age and same sort of life circumstance. She asked him, why would you do this? Why would you go for somebody so much like what you already had in me? And she said all he could do was stammer. Well, she didn't anticipate that things would end in divorce, but they did. So she said there was a lot of work to be done of reorganizing life after the end of a long marriage, separating out belongings, and she said even friends, who gets custody of which friend. Um, he moved out. She stayed in the house. She said it was too big of a house. They bought it to raise a family in, and now it was just her and the dog rambling about, she said. But she did stay in the house. Um, she did make a few little attempts. She said she went on a girls' like cruise with some girlfriends, but she said they ended up being kind of catty and petty, and she didn't enjoy it at all. She had a few other like girl dates with other widowed or divorced women, but she said largely she didn't want to go back into dating. But she made a choice to try to reach out a bit. Her kids and some people in her circle of friends were saying you should get out there, put yourself out, and there's going to be a guy who would love to be with you. Well, she really wasn't interested in dating. She said that the whole idea of going out to dinner and a movie and somebody pulling out a chair on what's obviously a formal date, she didn't want that. But she had the idea that she liked to cook and she liked her home, and there was a gentleman somewhere in their circle who was also divorced, and she decided to invite him to dinner in her home. She said she hadn't any idea that the dinner that she was having um, was anything more than that, but apparently all along he had carnal intentions, she said. So there came a point after dinner, um, seated on the couch in front of the fireplace, where he forced himself upon her. She first he made an advance that she tried to giggle and cast aside, and then he became the aggressor. And she said it was just horrid, and it all happened right there on the couch and on the floor. She said there was nothing tender or loving about it at all. It was just horrid, and she showed me a little bit of that in the dream. She could hardly believe herself, but then she said he gathered himself up and prepared to leave and threatened her that if she thought this was bad, she'd be in for much worse if she were ever to speak of this. Well, she said, I didn't really decide, I defaulted. I didn't decide not to speak of it, I just didn't. Then she said, I was living with this secret and it began to be weighty. She said she went out and got a security system, which seemed like a reasonable thing for a divorced woman living alone to do. But she said it wasn't just that. I got more cautious about everything. I made sure that I would not be entered by anyone at all. And she said, for example, with her kids and grandkids, the ones that were out of town when they'd come, it was off limits to stay the night. She said she said they didn't know it, but my house had become a crime scene. I didn't want to invite my grandchildren into a sleepover in my home. So I arranged for the hotel. She said I also arranged everything, and they learned that I would be the grandmother that I chose to be, and only that. So she would make the play dates to the zoo or the whatever to entertain the grandchildren. Everything had to be done on her uh, according to her plan. If anyone pushed against it, she barked at them. So people learned that better to go along with whatever it is that Ellen plans. She said her circle of friends, some began to distance themselves. Some of that is just a consequence of divorce, but others of it was because she um, was snappish and unpleasant if they suggested things to her that she like dating. None of them knew that she had been raped. Well, she said she did go to some counselors to talk about the divorce and other parts of her life, but she said if they got too close to the most painful part, I wouldn't go back. I'd find another counselor. So she wasn't going to talk about having been raped. She decided, or I guess defaulted, into being that way for the rest of her life. She said, I just made sure that nobody could get into me. So I think she eventually moved into some kind of senior housing as she became, as that became necessary for medical reasons. And she had some. She said those places are very heavily feminine, so she had some late in life, social life with a few lady friends, but she mostly died kind of all tied up in knots. Well, she arrived into an afterlife where she learned that the idea of re-engaging and living one's life again involved more effort than she would have thought. She wasn't a religious person, neither was her mother. She said, I wasn't really thinking that there would be an afterlife or that there would be reunions. But then once I was in an afterlife, I learned that I would need to um, re-engage with my own life and be a person who made choices and had new experiences. And I had helpers with that. Um, when we do these stories, there's they're done in two parts. The main one is getting people moved from the afterlife realm of healing where they have been out of it and onto better things because they don't need that level of care any longer. That's common to all these stories. She she mentioned that when it came time for someone to come for her, the person who came for her was her mother. And her mother emerged as though from a dawning sun. Ellen told us that she loved to watch the sunrise and that especially after the divorce and when she was living alone, she often woke up before sunrise And even on cold days, she'd bundle up and take a cup of coffee outside in her backyard and watch the sun come up. Well, she said when it came time for someone to escort her on to better things, her mother came. And her mother was backlit by the rising sun. But she said, you know, if you were photographing someone, you don't want them backlit. That's going to make their face be in shadow. But she said this was not that. The sun was behind her, but the light was coming through her. She said, my mother was letting me know that there was light inside her, and I knew that it could be inside me too. Now, remember, they weren't religious people, but she said my mother conveyed that to me in this first experience of her seeing her in the afterlife, backlit, but with light coming through her. And I think her mother said, I've come to help you turn the light back on. You used to have light within you. It's just it got dimmed. So, uh, in these trilogies, I first tell a story, as I've just done here, but then we always go back and get their permission to use the story. And in the second time that we talk to them, we don't chat them up. We just have a holy purpose. So we go into protected prayer and ask permission to share their story publicly. Well, uh, in that story, Ellen gave us quite a lot of follow through. So that's why we included her story in this third book, whose subtitle is Please Let Me Explain, because Ellen did such a good job of explaining her comeback from the trauma that had happened to her. She did that as a person knowing that her healing or comeback wasn't complete, but it was on its way, and that was enough. And her mother was there to help. And there's more to be told in the story. The way we do that on the podcast is we do this first episode to tell the story. Then on the second of the trilogy, we call that compassionate response. So this story has been out there, in the public domain for a couple of years, and some of us have been touched by it by having been a part of it originally. So how have we responded to it? What did it evoke in us? Uh, I would say that I felt a love for Ellen right away. She wasn't someone who was touchy-feely, certainly after her rape, but she just has a spirit that's just so lovely. Um, she had a love of art and of beauty. Saint Cecilia had a love of music. She said, I didn't really have a lot of musical talent, but I loved beauty and beautiful things and being surrounded by beautiful surroundings. Um, she gave an example of if there was a piece of framed art on the wall of her house that was just a little bit askew, she had to straighten it right away. It used to be that she would straighten it to make it more beautiful, but then she said sometimes after my rape, I would straighten it out of annoyance. How dare you be crooked? I can't stand that. I need there to be order. She said, my life didn't feel organized and well ordered inside any longer. It didn't feel beautiful inside. And so when something would be out of order externally, she would be annoyed and felt like she needed to set it right out of annoyance. Well, I just thought that was a really good insight. Well, anyway, the second part of these trilogies is compassionate response. And the third one is spiritual practice, something from the Catholic Christian tradition of which I'm a member, that might help you as you listen to this story and perhaps take it to heart. So remember, this story is in Afterlife Interrupted, Book 3. That's on the shelf right behind me. If you'd like to read it in full, it's there. It's also available in audiobook form if you'd like to hear it read by my prayer partners and I. But for now, that's the basics of this story. We'll go into it more deeply in the next two podcasts. Remember that I'm always praying for you, and when I do, I pray for especially submerged, hidden, stuffed uh, trauma, pain in you. It doesn't have to be as dramatic as Ellen's, but it's this can be a hard life, and getting through it sometimes we have to work through a lot of things. So I don't need to know what those things are to pray for you and ask the Holy Spirit to find its way into you and go to the root of wherever there might be pain in you that you could be freed from and lifted above. So I'm praying for you for that. If you want to be in touch with me, the best way to do that is through the website, nathan-castle.com. Just go to the contact button. It'll ask for a little menu that gives me a phone number and a time zone. I prefer to text or sometimes make a brief call to answer a question rather than to email and type. It's just my preference. So that's it for this time. I hope you'll join me again next time on our next episode of the Joyful Friar podcast. God bless you. Bye-bye.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Joyful Friar. Please like, follow, and subscribe. You can visit me at nathan-castle.com. Send me a message by clicking the contact button. God bless.
Have you ever had to do something so difficult that you had to deal with it in stages? Imagine dying suddenly with no forewarning. Being in a car crash, a shooting, a drowning. You leave your body, but then what? How do you transition into the afterlife? For some, it flows all at once, but not for everybody. For some, the process of transitioning into the afterlife is interrupted. Maybe there's a need for rest or for learning, or maybe just the chance to adjust to such an abrupt experience. I'm Father Nathan Castle. I'm a Catholic priest. About 23 years ago, the Holy Spirit began to send me people who had died traumatically. They entered my dreams during sleep, showing me what had happened to them and asking for help. They had died and moved on, sort of, but they'd come to a moment where it was time to complete the crossing. With the help of the angels and saints and earthly prayer partners, we've assisted more than 300 souls as they complete their crossing. You can read about it in my book series. Afterlife Interrupted books are available on Amazon. You can also learn more by visiting my website, nathan-castle.com. God bless you.